All right, so I don't want to make this go very much longer, but I did want to talk to you guys a little bit about why I want to talk about the Wall Street occupennial, um, because there's so much political rhetoric surrounding Occupy Wall Street, what it is, what it meant, how successful it was. I mean, there's so many different conversations that you can have, but specifically in relationship to what Grant Kester puts forth in his text, he talks about the fact that these communities that he's dealing with, the ones um, that utilize dialogical processes, these communities, in one sense, are brought together under the heading of the project, but in another sense, they are brought together because of a totalitarian regime, or at least that's one of the terms that he kind of floats around. And this is a conversation that bubbles up around his mentioning of La Familia. Uh, and La Familia, this group of migrant workers, had a very fluid sense of community. There was this in and out. People knew that it was transitory. It was very much time based. And once opportunities or life happened, this community could be broken apart or shifted around however it needed to. So, and the artist that he cites there, let me Crujido, is acknowledging the fact that this is a very fluid community and it isn't rigid. It isn't all of the police in Oakland County. It isn't all of the young youths of color in Oakland County. It is this group of people that will change. Now, Kester kind of initiates that in opposition to each other. There's this totalitarian structured thing where like people are oppressed and they are identified by their oppression versus this fluid community. Or he doesn't really say that it's versus, but I want to say outright that it's not. This totalitarian structure of American commerce keeps this group, La Familia, very fluid. These people can't establish permanent residencies, and so they cannot ever become permanent fixtures within this community. They constantly have to be fluid members, moving around to different farms, to different opportunities. This kind of fluidity is what is represented with the Occupy Wall Street movement and the whole situation. Basically, you had these group of people descend on lower Manhattan that were pissed off. And really quickly, creative people began to swarm around them to see what was going on. By and large, this was because a lot of creative people were not making a lot of money, and New York specifically was becoming an inhospitable environment for creative production. As we're all going to see when we're down there in the wintertime, it is this like wildly the market's huge in New York, but to be a living artist in New York is really, really difficult. And people were pissed about it. And so they came down to Wall Street, and really quickly there was this cultural branch, this cultural offshoot of the Occupy movement, which was actually, for me, my inroads. Because at first I was like, great, there's a protest in this very antiquated form of protest that is probably not going to answer the questions that it's putting forth. But then I heard that there was a library. And I heard that these people who were living down there had decided that culture was such an important aspect of who they were as people that they needed to have some sort of access to it. And I mean creative culture specifically. And so the first thing they did was maintain a library. The second thing that they did was to actually begin, as this site is doing, to collect different bits of information. I mean, these are just some snippets of blog posts, but we have photographs of events, or of a balloon, photographs of events, different posters that people have made, different relics of ephemeral projects that happen in other parts of the city. Yet another protester. I'm really hoping that the photographer here, Meenakshi, is going to meet with us in the wintertime. just FYI. And awesomely enough, here is Mina, as I know her, um, talking to Russell Simmons about why he decided to support Occupy. So basically, Occupy was this hotbed of attention where people were coming and voicing their concerns about the general structure of our system in a very situationist kind of thing. And there were lots of people writing around the occupation that were citing Guy Debord and citing the Dadaists and bringing up these names. And so it's really important that we understand that these are very viable options, but that they are also have a historical precedent. So this website, as you can see, is just called the Wall Street Occupennial. I recommend that you kind of pour through it a little bit, but I want to switch gears a little bit and go from something that is very political into something that is a little bit more formally engaged. This is a show that happened at the Institute of Contemporary Art at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And basically, really quickly, I want you guys to go through this on your own, but I just want to give you a summation of what it was. As you can see here, over the course of 10 weeks, January 20th to March 25th, 2007, the gallery will host 75 events of all kinds. Viewer participation required. This was one of the first shows that tried to bring together collective practices in a way that demanded viewer participation. There were other moments, other exhibitions that came up in the 1990s. And Grant Kester brings them up here, and I'm drawing a total blank on what the name of them was. But basically in Chicago in the 1990s there was a similar show, but Kester kind of maligns the work for being too one way and not the other, and this is in his conversation with the author Kwan. But what happened with this show, it was one of the first acknowledgments, not necessarily of interactive practices or relational aesthetics. Much more specifically, it was just about collective practice. And so what this show engaged with were artist-run spaces that relied very heavily on collaboration and collectivity, such as the Black Floor Gallery, Space 1026, but also there were projects like Letter, LTTR, which is a publication that is pulled together by a variety of people around New York. So there's lots of information on here. It's kind of a rabbit hole that you can fall down, and so I kind of implore you to do so. And lastly, I'm going to leave you with a video that you can watch on these guys. So it's a Vimeo link, and it's all about the artist placement group, because this is a really interesting go-between, a very politically active group that was that came together as a group to affect change, but then broke off individually to make projects actually seem viable. And so it's kind of basically there's lots of different tangents from this idea of collective practice. Where is the collective defined? Is it defined in a meeting and then broken apart to become a viable option as artist placement group? Is it pulled together under the auspices to better a community, in the sense of Suzanne Lacey and Code 33 and that project, where it's a single author that is working within a community? Or is it more formally based, like Gelatin, where the group comes together under an assumed authorial name? So they shed all their individual being and become one mass. Gelatin produces projects. Or, as in the locally localized Gravity show at the ICA, all of these different spaces come together to allow spaces to exist and conversations to exist, both within the art world and in the kind of liminal space where the art world bleeds, as it were, into broader culture. Okay, so that's pretty much the lecture. It's in 3 parts. Again, I recommend that you go through the localized gravity, tease out anything that you seem interested in, and also watch this video. Yeah, it's kind of a funny video, but it's interesting to watch. So that's that.